Hello, this is Niswander, and welcome to the Nowman Show. Clifford Tasner is a music composer, an orchestrator for Hollywood films and more. He's leader and activist of the musical group The Billionaires and the president of the American Democrats.
It's Americans for Democratic Action.
Americans for Democratic
Southern California
Action.
chapter.
The Southern California chapter.
Yeah.
And Cliff, thank you very much for being on the Nowman Show.
I'm really happy to be here. ADA was founded by Eleanor Roosevelt in 1947. We're a left progressive organization, and it's a little de-democratic. We're not actually part of the Democratic Party. So
That's fantastic. So in other words, you would endorse
we
Green
have
Party people?
sometimes endorsed people who are not Democrats.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because we were looking for viable and credible progressives, and so
That's the key word right there,
yeah,
progressives.
well, yeah, and also we want them to be credible, or else our constituency would look at us like we're crazy, you know. But if they're not viable, then it's kind of a hopeless enterprise, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've got a lot to get into here. Shall we start with
let's
start with immigration?
absolutely.
You know, you are an expert on the history of immigration.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and the thing is, watching what's happening at the border, which is just horrific, and watching the way that Donald Trump is whipping up a nativist frenzy, you know, I want people to understand that this is nothing new.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
America has a history of exclusion and inclusion, you know.
Yeah.
But until 1924, with the exception of Chinese people, you know, in 1880, 82, 84, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. And it
By
was, of course,
Congress?
Yeah, it was a completely racist thing.
Wow.
To keep the Chinese were coming in here to build our railroads, and you know, they were the people who they'd send to do all the dangerous work of setting up the bomb, you know, the dynamite and blowing it up. And they died in large numbers. They worked cheaper than the white people, but there was this fear of the yellow peril coming in, and so they passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. And at that point, interestingly enough, my wife's father is Japanese. His grandfather was a samurai sword maker in Japan at the time when the Emperor Meiji outlawed the samurai. So he was a metal worker who couldn't practice his craft. So like a lot of Japanese people, after they banned the Chinese, a lot of Japanese people came over, and he worked on the railroads.
Really?
Yeah, he worked on the railroads and then bought a farm up in Auburn, and then they put them all in the camps. He died in the camps.
Oh, really?
The concentration camps that they put Japanese people in.
Yeah.
You know, I want to use that word. We're going to get back to it.
Well, that is true. That's what it is.
So in 1884, I think, the Chinese Exclusion Act. But then there was a huge wave of immigration of people from Southern and Eastern Europe. So that's Jewish people, Slavic people, Russians, Poles, Czechs, Greek people, Southern and Mediterranean people, Italians and Greeks also. There was a huge wave of these peoples. These people were not coming to the United States in large numbers before about 1880. So between 1880 and World War I, millions of people came from Southern and Eastern Europe.
That's right.
And
my family came from Switzerland. They came
well,
across
the
Ellis
Swiss
Island.
were not being as excluded as much as
that's right.
as Eastern and Southern Europeans.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of this was religious. People were very upset. The Protestants who were running this country were concerned about all these Catholic people coming in, or the Jewish people coming in.
too.
So in 1917, a psychologist by the name of Dr. Robert Yerkes, did a series of IQ tests on conscripts to fight in World War I. American people had been drafted to fight in World War I.
Yeah, yeah.
People, and it's interesting because the people who were from Southern and Eastern Europe had just gotten here, barely spoke English.
Yes, exactly.
The people who were of Scandinavian descent or German descent or Scottish descent or Irish descent had been here for a number of generations and were fluent American English speakers, and he did the IQ test in English. And he was able to prove that people from Southern and Eastern Europe, Jewish people, Slavic people, Mediterranean people, Greeks, Italians, were morons.
That was his
his result. His thesis was they were morons, while Northern and Western European people were brilliant.
Is that because of not being able to speak the
That's
language?
exactly how he was able to use the IQ test to manipulate. It's like the bell curve. Remember that book, The Bell Curve, that managed to use IQ in such a way as to somehow convince people that African American people are less intelligent than other people, white people, et cetera.
Grief.
So, you know, IQ testing has been used in all kinds of ways to push a particular racist agenda. You know, luckily there was an amnesty. My uncle was in he was drafted in World War II, and so families of soldiers who fought were given an amnesty. So my grandparents went back to Montreal and then came back into the country and were able to become citizens.
Wow.
In 1945 or 46 or something like
well, no, my family, my grandfather, his name was Niswander, and my grandmother, her name was Gerber. She was more on the French side. She was
These are
multilingual.
Swiss people. Yeah.
And I went to Ellis Island and I learned the story. I saw a picture of the ship, and literally it's also an economic class system because the ship itself was an example of that. I mean, if you were on the if you came in the freight, right?
Steerage. People
you would be considered, the third class.
Right.
And then my grandparents were in the middle section, so they were second class.
Nice.
And then if you were at the top with the captain and the top of the crew there,
right,
then you were first class, and that's where the rich people were.
Sure.
So, and they definitely evaluated you when you came in there. They have computers in the area now. And then you go up the top of the stairs, there's a table there, they still have the table there.
Right.
And they sign you in. And they were explaining this story to me, and I got real emotional. I didn't think I was, but I was starting to realize, oh my God, they were literally like right here.
That's right.
And they went up those stairs right there, and that table, they stood in front of that table. Right there. It was very emotional for me to realize that here I'm at that exact spot where they first saw America. And they signed his name in exactly, Ernst Niswander. Most people, that was first letter and then last name, they signed his whole name in, and it actually bled over into the next line. And they showed me the ship and all that, what it looked like, and I realized, so if you had some money, if you had a lot of money, you were in the first class. If you had some money, you were in the second class. If you had no money, you were with the freight and the crew in the bottom. So, and then those are the people that got detained.
Because they got sick.
Because they had no money.
And also, they also were sick. A lot of them caught diseases being stuck in steerage.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. When I realized that made me realize a lot of history that I didn't get in school.
Sure.
And sometimes you have to actually go to the actual source to find that information.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Well, the whole notion of who's legal and who's illegal. You'll hear a lot of these racist people say, oh, well, they should come in legally.
Right.
Well, in that, unless you're Native American or a descendant of an African American slave, every one of the rest of us, or if you're Latino and the border crossed you, every one of the rest of us is an immigrant.
That's right. That's
We're all immigrants. And at some point, if it was before 1924, there was no such thing as illegal or illegal. Mm-hmm. Anybody, if you could get here, if you could cross in from Canada the way that one of my grandfathers crossed in from Canada before World War I. So he wasn't illegal.
That's right.
He got to America at a time when there was no laws preventing, if you weren't Chinese, you could come in.
That's right.
But after that time, so when the Holocaust was happening in Germany, America could have opened its doors to Jews and saved millions of people from dying. My grandmother lost 28 family members.
Oh, you're kidding, wow.
Yeah.
A lot of people did.
All her brothers were killed, all their families were killed. One cousin survived and was in several death camps and talked to me about it. I mean, in the 1930s, before we entered the war, there was a huge Nazi movement in America. They called them the Bund.
The Bund, yeah.
And you probably saw that footage of that Madison Square Garden rally of
and
thousands and thousands of American Nazis getting together to celebrate Hitler and the American Reich. Charles Lindbergh was sympathetic to it and even considered running for president on a keep us out of the war ticket and don't fight with Hitler ticket. But I want to think about the fact that the same hatred that Americans have for people of color, Latin people, and the same hatred that's driving what's going on right now at the border and driving Trump's policies is not unique. It's been happening to other people's coming in here.
This is not a new phenomenon.
And sadly, a lot of the people who've gotten in here have an attitude of shut the door. Shut the barn door.
I know, it's
shut
weird.
The front door. I'm here.
It's very, very weird.
Yeah, and they forget, and they'll say things like, oh, they should come here legally like my ancestors did. Well, it was easy to come here legally if you were from Western Europe and the quotas were such, or it was easier to come here legally before World War I.
That's right.
If you were fleeing El Salvador, which had a right-wing government that we liked, we wanted to keep you out of America.
Right,
we deported gang members who were American gang members of El Salvador descent, and now El Salvador is written by... So I do want to point out that the people who are fleeing here, these asylum seekers, are fleeing here from countries that we've rendered ungovernable.
That's right.
You know, Manuel Zelaya was a progressive who won the election in Honduras and started doing the kind of reforms that we would want to see here.
That's
you know,
right.
Medicine for everybody, schools, education, distribution of land, distribution of wealth.
That's why we have our interventionist wars, Cliff.
Yeah.
I mean, because essentially we want to maintain control.
Well, we supported it. In fact, it was interesting. The State Department was run by Hillary Clinton. She was our Secretary of State.
That's right.
They supported the coup in Honduras.
That's right.
And elected a right-wing fascist dictator.
That's right.
And the people are fleeing there because it's a hellhole. It's basically
right. Exactly.
the murder capital of the West. Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz was the democratically elected progressive leader of Guatemala. We took him out because he was interfering with United Fruit's ownership of all the land. So the people are fleeing here. They're fleeing from terror. And just because, you know, everybody gets upset because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called them concentration camps, that's what they are.
That's what they are.
And I'm saying that as a Jewish person who had family die in concentration camps. When we took over the Philippines, we put the Filipinos in the Spanish-American War in concentration camps. What we did to the Japanese, when you concentrate a population of non-combatants in a place where they're neglected and mistreated, when you've got women drinking out of the toilet on the border, children without blankets, without toothpaste, without their parents, it's a concentration camp. And we have to look at the fact that these people are fleeing. And I just want to end with this. Jewish people say never again when we think about the Holocaust. And I think in Israel that for them it means never should Jewish people ever be seen as vulnerable. But here for progressive Jewish people, it means never should we tolerate anybody being treated the way we were treated. And we have to stand up and we have to open our hearts. And when people are fleeing for their lives, they're coming to America, the land of immigrants, we have to open our hearts to them because they're desperate. And this is the best place for them to be.
That's right, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly right. Well, we could go on and on about that. Great history lesson there. Thanks for sharing that. But one of the reasons why you're here today is to talk about your music videos.
Oh, yeah.
And plastic pollution. Now, you did 2 music videos. We're going to watch.
We got a third one coming, but Californians Against Waste is one of a group that's part of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. And they engaged me and an animator named Cole Montminy, who's a very innovative young guy who does really clever stuff. And so we've done a series of videos about plastic pollution and how it makes no sense to use something. I'm glad these are glass. It makes no sense to use something for 5 minutes that lasts for 10,000 years. That's going to outlive us. So that's...
let's watch now A Night of the Living Plastic.
Night of the Living Plastics.
There's more plastic packaging, another foam cup, and another plastic bottle they keep building up. So you drink a cup of coffee and you throw that cup away. And you build a plastic mountain every single day. Plastic packaging.
You buy another bottle and you empty out the bottle and you toss away the bottle.
And what happens to the bottle? Tonight you'll hear us sing discarded plastic packaging. It's we are sure to linger on long after you are gone.
Okay, so plastics now, they can be recycled and they can be reused, but
a lot of them aren't recycled, though. That's the thing. And if they're dirty in any way, it has to be discarded. It can, in fact, pollute all the other plastic.
Because if they're dirty, they won't recycle it, right?
The Chinese used to take our plastics. Now they're not taking them anymore.
Oh, wow.
And poorer countries like Malaysia are now starting to not want our plastics. And so really what we have to do is cut down on using them, except for the fact that the oil companies, because plastics are made out of petroleum, are looking for another thing to market just in case maybe the Green New Deal does become a reality. Maybe we do start doing something about climate change, and maybe they don't get to sell us, fossil fuels anymore, but they can still make plastics. And they're incredibly destructive. It isn't that they aren't convenient, but we have to start looking at our lives and realize that, we were able to function just fine without
plastic.
A lot of plastic.
Yes.
And it would mean slightly less, it would be slightly inconvenient, and it would be saving our lives and saving our planet. So that's
right,
the
that's
question.
right.
If you had to not get your chai latte in a plastic cup and had to go get a mug or a glass, or people start maybe carrying around, in our car we have a tiffin, which is in Indian and Thailand, they have the metal, it's a metal contraption with 3 little compartments, and when I go out to eat, if we have leftovers, we put it in the tiffin.
Oh, wow.
We don't get any styrofoam carrying, clamshell that...
It's good. I didn't think about that. When you get leftovers, why can't you bring your own container?
You can carry a mug in your car.
That's right. Exactly.
And if you get a drink at a restaurant, they give you a plastic cup. Say, oh no, I've got a cup with me. I brought something.
Oh, wow.
We all need to start living like that.
That's right.
And the folks who don't want to, if you're drinking something for 5 minutes and having it last forever, it makes no sense.
That's right. So let's get into the politics.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the debates and supposedly the front runner is Joe Biden?
This is the thing. I feel like Joe Biden is being marketed to us by a news media that is owned by big corporations. Like, let's give an example, MSNBC.
Yeah.
MSNBC is very anti-Bernie Sanders. And
totally.
They're owned by Comcast.
That's right.
You think Comcast wants to live in a country where Bernie Sanders takes over and starts mandating equal time for, reinstituting the fairness doctrine?
Right.
Starts breaking up these big monopolies into smaller units that are more manageable and don't control as much of our messaging and information.
That's right.
So Joe Biden is being sold to us as the candidate who can beat Trump. And I think that as people learn more about Joe Biden, I think they're going to see that he's actually the candidate that can easily lose to Trump.
Explain talk to about his actual policies and what he's actually voted on.
He has a really lousy record.
Yeah.
Until very recently. So in 1970s, he was elected at a time when there was a lot. The segregationists like Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms were very powerful. These were Democrats. They were Dixiecrats.
He was working with them, actually.
He was proud to be with them. He
That's
spoke at their events. He joked that Delaware would have joined the South, the Confederates, if they hadn't gotten lost on the way. And he basically got elected to defeat busing efforts, anti-desegregation legislation.
Yeah.
And Biden was absolutely against, but it wasn't just the busing thing. He was the author. People vilified Hillary Clinton for supporting that terrible crime bill that resulted in so many young people of color going to jail for a lot of victimless crimes, including marijuana possession.
Mm-hmm.
And Biden was the author of that bill.
That's right.
He wrote that bill
by himself.
And
did he have a co-author?
He was maybe I had a co-author, but his name was on that bill.
Yeah.
And he was the guy who, right before Obama chose him to be vice president, he said this incredibly racist thing.
Wow.
He said, well, Obama's unique in that he's a black man who's actually clean and presentable.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. It's not the exact quote, but it's very close. Go look it up. You'll see that I'm not.
Wow.
The gist of it. And I actually think that they convinced Obama to put him on the ticket because he had a much better chance of getting elected if he had a white racist on the ticket.
That would be, Obama was conservative, so
he was a conservative Democrat, and they said they'll make white people feel more comfortable. I was just guessing because Biden has a terrible record on race, so that's the first thing. And in fact, just yesterday or the other day, he said that poor children are just as intelligent as white children.
Exactly. He also voted for going into Iraq. And people like Bernie voted against that.
That's right, the warmonger. Biden
because Bernie felt like there wasn't enough information for him to vote otherwise.
Well, there was actually plenty of information to vote otherwise. I mean, we
That's
had
true.
so much. I mean, people on the left knew that this was a bad idea. We'd heard Scott Ritter, who was the weapons inspector, testify. He talked about it, but Biden wouldn't let Scott Ritter testify. Biden was the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he refused to let any opponents or critics of this war effort testify to what we now look back at one of the biggest foreign policy blunders in American history.
Right, exactly.
Biden was the guy who was the head of the Judicial Committee when Clarence Thomas came up for consideration, and Anita Hill
That's right.
made a very credible complaint. And there were 3 other women who could have corroborated Anita Hill's complaint that Clarence Thomas had been sexually harassing her, and Biden refused to let them testify because he'd made a promise to his Republican friends that he would get this thing through. When Roe v. Wade was decided, Biden gave a big speech on how women do not have the right to control their own bodies.
That's
and Biden
right.
was consistently anti-abortion. He voted with Ronald Reagan's stance throughout the 80s. He supported the Hyde Amendment, which
Yes,
was
that's right.
Henry Hyde was the really right-wing Republican from Illinois, and it's the bill that makes it illegal for any money to be spent by the federal government providing abortion services to poor women. Biden supported it until May of this year.
Wow.
And in fact, that week,
Even all the
that
while
week
he was
even
vice
said he
president.
was for it. He said he was for it that week, and
That's
then,
right.
then some of his
That's
people
right.
must have talked him out of it. So,
Wow.
and he's the guy who helped push through George Bush's bankruptcy bill. And that's the reason why all these young people saddled with college debt can't declare bankruptcy for college
Oh, really?
debt.
Wow.
Because of this deplorable bill that Joe Biden was instrumental in passing.
And how come a lot of people don't seem to know about this
Well,
stuff?
because they're not talking about it.
That's
but
right.
it's
We are.
all there. You
Right
can-
here on the
it's
Nowman Show, we're
Right there.
talking
This
about
is
it.
public record. We're not dreaming
Yeah,
stuff up
that's
here.
right. What about Kamala Harris, real quick?
Well, Kamala Harris is another person who has had a fairly conservative record, is getting a lot of corporate money, and because she was the DA and because she was the Attorney General, she wanted to have a good relationship with police departments, and she didn't push through real change that would have done something about the way that people of color are treated by police
and
departments.
didn't she also didn't she extend the sentences of some of these people so that
She-
would help the
she
private
was-
prisons make
she-
more
she-
money because
she
they were for
doesn't
profit?
have a progressive record.
Yeah.
Now, she's been running as a progressive, but she said she's for Medicare for all. And if you take a look at her bill, it's basically a 10-year plan to keep insurance companies in power.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
it's not Medicare
kind
for
of
all.
laughable to see. I am of the opinion that the one candidate who actually can win is Bernie.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't say that quixotically. I don't say that just because it's the first time in my lifetime as a progressive lefty that I have heard somebody who has a chance of becoming a leader in this
And
country
why would
articulate
you?
the
Real
things that-
briefly, we got to wrap it up after
Yeah.
this. But why Bernie Sanders in your view?
Well, not only does he stand for all the things that we really need, because the problems facing our country cannot be solved by corporate incrementalists, because
That's
they're
right.
basically caused by corporations. So Democrats in the pay of these corporations aren't going to solve, if you're getting money from the oil companies, you're not going to solve our desperate climate catastrophe. If you're getting money from the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies, you're not going to solve our healthcare dilemma.
And that's why Bernie says that we have to go against this.
That's right. We have to.
And you have to mobilize the people to go with you.
Absolutely.
So that we can demand the changes that have to be made, which is why he takes the position that he does. Millions of people need to stand together and demand change, because change never happens from the top down. It always happens from the bottom up.
Well, the thing is,
right?
as people hear him, even he's gone for the last 2 years. He's been going to red states. He'll go
Yeah,
to
that's
West
right.
Virginia and talk about Medicare for all to a Republican audience.
That's right, that's
who will
right.
give him a standing ovation.
That's
at the
right,
end.
that's right.
He has a way of engaging people of all different political stripes on just the reality of it. People know that he's honest. People know he's not bought and paid for. And the other thing is he has an army of people on the ground. So, the same polls that indicate that Joe Biden could beat Trump, they
Yep.
all indicate that Bernie can beat Trump.
That's right.
So if we have a choice
Exactly.
between an incrementalist who's bought and paid for by corporations who is not going to change anything, he's going to bring us back to the same status quo where corporations own all our politicians, but we're not racist.
That's right. That's right.
And we're not homophobic,
And then there's Elizabeth Warren, who is not really as far left as Bernie Sanders is, which
She's impressive, though. I mean, she's good. I favor Bernie over Elizabeth,
Yeah.
but I have to say, she stands for a lot of the same things. Perhaps they'd be a great ticket together.
Well, we'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
I also like Tulsi. I agree with Mike Gravel. I
Well,
think that would be a good
The biggest concern I have about
good
Tulsi,
vice president.
she spent all her teenage years as a fundamentalist, anti-gay minister.
But she was young.
She was young.
And you remember when you were young, too.
You know what? I've never not been a leftist.
Yeah. Well, I was conservative Republican
Okay,
because
well, I'm
of how I
glad you
was.
came over. And,
But when I got into college, things changed, and
Right.
you know what I mean. You do see things differently when you get exposed to more things in the world. It took me going to university to get more of a broad view of the world and make new friends to really see that okay, the world isn't this very small little group of narrow-minded thinking.
that's why we need diversity.
That's right.
That's why we
And
need
that's what-
to
see,
have why affirmative action is such a powerful thing, because it allows people to meet people from other communities that
that's
they've
right.
never met.
That's
The
right.
more you're exposed to other people,
The broader your
know,
thinking
it's
becomes,
it's why
the more
these
accepting that you become.
that's why a lot of these countries have like 5 weeks paid vacation or 8 weeks paid vacation every year, and they travel around the world and meet
That's right.
people. Americans get, if they get vacation, it's 2 weeks. It's enough time to go to Disneyland and back, or it's enough time to stay in your house, you know, and fill up
very
the
true.
inflatable pool for your kids. Americans don't travel, so Americans don't learn anything.
That's right.
Americans have no idea what people elsewhere think of us.
Well, it depends on who you're talking about, but I
Yeah,
understand.
but I'm
what
saying
you know.
as a general rule,
general rule.
very few Americans get a chance to get to see the world
That's
and meet
right.
people from other places and hear what they think.
That's right. Well, in Middle America, I can definitely say that that's true for sure, based on experiences I had. But then, when you have an awakening, or when you have experiences that expose you, then it changes you. It's a major
It
transformation.
does. But Bernie's message does resonate with
It
Middle
does.
America. Look at how he beat Hillary in the Michigan primary. He got most of the votes.
And Wisconsin,
And these are states that
And
have
West
to- that
Virginia.
would be in play.
and
if it's
Pennsylvania, Ohio.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and those were the
absolutely.
states that basically Trump got the Electoral College votes in.
Right.
So
And if it's Biden, Trump can pull out the same playbook of running against Washington insiders.
that's right, and
He
it'll
can't
work.
run against Bernie that way. He'd have to come up with some other strategy.
Because Bernie's the real populist, if there is one.
If you're going to have two populists running against each other, one guy who actually stands for people and points out the real problem is the corporations that are undermining everything
That's
that own
right.
our political
And
system.
he's right.
It's
And if
absolutely
you,
true.
well, I get into that in another episode, but yeah, if that's, and I recommend everyone, and we got to wrap this up.
Oh, okay.
I recommend Joe Rogan's experience. You can see it on YouTube. A great interview with Bernie Sanders this week. We're talking right now. It's the top ranked video or trending video on YouTube. It's last time I saw yesterday, it was 6 million views and hundreds of thousands of comments, and all of them are positive. I've not seen one negative one yet, and people that thought Bernie was something other than they saw him portrayed in this interview. So he could be receiving millions of new voters just from that one video. So that's interesting. Anyway, we got to wrap this
Well,
up.
this is great.
Good to
Spend some
see you
time with you. We
again.
haven't
and-
done this in a while.
Yeah, I know, and there's so much more we can talk about. Just a real quick closing comment, and then we need to wrap it up here.
Okay. For me, a
Yes,
closing
where
comment?
can people learn more about your work?
Okay, so basically, you can, if you want to see these videos, go to CAWrecycles.org, California. It's the Californians Against Waste, and so they put our videos up. If you want to see these latest videos, you want to learn more about Americans for Democratic Action, that's adasocal.org.
Excellent.
If you want to learn more about me and hear some of my music, including my activism music, go to cliffordjtasner.com.
Fantastic.
It's just the J, and there's no punctuation until you get to the dot. cliffordjtasner.com. So,
Cliff, thank you so much for being on the
Good to
Nowman
be here,
Show.
man.
Always great to see you.
cheers.
Cheers, and this is Niswander, and you've been watching the Nowman Show. Stay present, always.
There's another